Hey guys, welcome back to another weekly podcast. Um, sorry. This week is going to be the penultimate podcast. I know you guys have been enjoying this, but this is the penultimate podcast. So next week will be the final podcast for this series. However, this podcast is going to be regarding Paul's internal conflicts, continuing on in All Quiet on the Western Front. So, I'm going to start off with just something which is what I think is the main part, which is what I gathered by reading the book. So what I really noticed was basically how the book has progressed into the actual conflict, and how like the conflict, like the wars part, has become a really significant part in the internal conflicts of Paul, especially. A little bit more about that later, but I feel like from the start of the book, where everyone's really hyped about going, like everyone's being like trained, and everyone's how can I say this? Like everyone is, they're being trained like really hard to go into war. But now the conflict is starting to settle in, and it's the change in how the soldiers, and Paul especially, how Paul sees the whole war aspect, and how he has different opinions about it now. So I'm going to start off by talking about the the main antagonist. So sorry. So unlike in most novels or books, for example, let's say why don't we say Little Red Riding Hood. So the antagonist in that would be the big bad wolf, and in All Quiet on the Western Front, there's actually no set antagonist. In my opinion, because I feel like Paul is, his brain is having that realization, and he's seeing the bigger picture. Well, he's thinking outside the box, while everyone's still thinking inside the box, and everyone's doing they're following direct instructions, and they have the very narrow vision of what war is, whereas I think Paul has a very wide view of what situation he's in, and that's why I think there's no set distinguishable bad guy, so to speak. But the main the main antagonist I believe the main antagonist is within themselves, and the main antagonist is the war, because the war is basically moving, it's basically they've been brainwashed to think just to kill people. And in chapter 7, Paul is, as I said, in chapter 7, Paul is actually realizing that there's no point in killing the opposition. And also in chapter 7, Paul went home. However, when Paul did go home, he was really unsure if going home was the smart, the right ideas, as he was worried, he had really deep, he was very, very conscious about his team, his comrades, because they're ride or die partners, really. So in chapter 7, I've got a quote here: "I'll be home for the next couple of days. Don't die, please." So this quote is quite significant, as it shows how Paul has really deep feelings about his comrades, and how they have really, really built up a relationship, because they've gone through everything together. They've gone through the training. They've gone through everything together. They've gotten to the stage, and Paul has this really deep feeling about going home for 17 odd days, and they've gone through the struggles together. And Paul, like, I've known this has happened like several times. Like, he went home, he was really, like, the first time he went home, he was really happy to see it. But when he went home the second time, he didn't seem to be, obviously he was obviously happy to, see his family and everything. But he still had in the back of his mind, he still had that, oh my gosh, I have to, like, what if one of my friends die? I don't want to be able to live with that. And, like, imagine doing that, going to work, school, wherever, and knowing that your friends are in a near death situation. Now, like, thinking about that is really stressful for me. And then, and he's, like, also noticing what war's doing to people. He's like, he knows that there's no real like cause to kill people. They're going to war for no reason at all. So I've got another quote. So on page 153, Paul is in a face-to-face situation with another country's soldier, so basically the enemy, and he kills him. And Paul feels like instant regret, like he's done it, and he obviously is really, really unhappy and really, really, he's regretful of it. So the quote is, "Why did I do this?" And I really think that this, like, he's saying to himself, like, why did I do this? It's like really just short for him, because that's a big click in his brain when he finally kills the person or the enemy. That's when he realizes there's no real reason to go to war. And that's really interesting about this book, how all the characters developed into this human killing, like, machine, and him, being the protagonist. He is really, like, he's really connected with himself and his internal conflict, which is why I thought this was a really good example. And that's a really big difference I've noticed while reading the book. So then moving on to the Russian God. So I'm going to start off by a quote, and on page 194, "I am frightened. I dare to think this way no more. This way lies in the abyss." So basically, this is also a really good quote, personally speaking. This represents his own internal conflict with himself, and he realizes that there is obviously no real conflict, as I mentioned several times before, but there's also no need to, like, hate them. Once again, they're going into war for no apparent reason, and I think that's what really hits him hard when he kills that soldier. They didn't know it. Like, they're the same person. That could have so easily happened to him. That so easily could happen to him. So I think that's why he's having that regret, because he knows that could happen to him and more. And I think how it could affect him, Paul more, would be if one of his comrades got shot and probably died. So unfortunately, that is going to be the end of the penultimate podcast for you. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and I'll see you next week for the final podcast. See you then.